I'm Joan Newcomb, and today's Mystic Minute is what time is all about. What you experience is time. You look at your watch and you can see time going by. You're sitting there waiting to get out of the class, out of the meeting. You need to be at a place at a certain time in order to catch that boat, that plane, get to that appointment. You know about time from, like, I used to be a little kid and now I'm not so little anymore, and sometime I'm going to be like really old. We perceive time as a measurement, and we also perceive time as passing. And we have a memory of times before now, and we can anticipate times coming up. And that is how we experience time in this reality. The past is more real to us because we've been there. The future is just kind of a vague concept, but we can know a little bit down the way. We can guess we'll be getting up tomorrow and that's what it's going to be like. We can anticipate what it'll be like in a few months' time. We can do a 5-year planning, a 10-year planning. We can anticipate out like that. But other than that, we can have a feeling sense of the history. We kind of have an intellectual sense of history. It's kind of fun to study history and have it come alive. But the future out there, you can kind of sense. As you go out to the future, it just becomes kind of vague. It's for science fiction. And that's how we experience time. I'm going to reframe it for you. That is how your body experiences time. It's real to your body from the moment it was born to the present moment. It's not real to it going out into the future because your body isn't there yet. I can notice for myself that I have a sense of reality of the past because, oh, my parents lived during that time. My grandparents lived during that time. So there's kind of a body thread reality to the past. But from my body's point of view, nobody's living out there yet. It's not alive out there. If you go farther out, it's like, well, I'm pretty certain that I won't be around in 100 years. I don't like thinking about that. And again, that's our body's perception of time. Another thing I'm aware of with the past is it feels heavier to me when I contemplate it. It feels solid in that kind of heavy kind of way. It feels slower. Think about the past and you go, wow, that was just simpler times. In the past, you had to write a letter. You wrote a letter and it took 2 weeks to get there. Past was a slower time. And right now it feels accelerated enough. I've already sent off a dozen emails and I've already texted my son in Europe, and I've read what's going on in China today. It's a much more accelerated experience right now. So to anticipate the future is just too mind-boggling. Cannot conceive it. So when you shift your perception and you think of time, or you become aware of time as something energetic, you can get the sense of it being slower, heavier, denser, and yet it's not there anymore, is it? I mean, you can stand in a historic place and you can imagine what it was like. You can sense the history of that place. You go out in nature and you stand on the side of a mountain and you can feel the immensity of that mountain and the sense that, wow, I'm standing here and this mountain's been here for thousands and thousands of years. I could be in this spot in the forest. There's no planes overhead. There's no one else but me. I could be anywhere in time standing in this forest. So when you're out alone in nature without that measurement, there's that sense of timelessness. When you're using technology, though, and then when you're anticipating the future, you can kind of feel the vibration raise and get very busy. And it's a higher vibration when you anticipate the future. So actually, even when you're just daydreaming, if you think about the idea of daydreaming, daydreaming is a very light, it's very high, it's not into form yet. So it's not real. And all of that is just from our physical body, which is kind of our anchor point. Our body is our anchor point in reality. And our body rides along time as if time is this little train track going from the past to the future. And our little body is this little car in the train track going from past to future. Very, very linear. I'm going to switch the view. Very linear experience, because we always think of the past as being back there and the future is out there. Very linear experience of time. When you shift your awareness up to that of consciousness, it starts to shift and change and not seem so linear. At your highest awareness, at our greatest awareness, as essence, there is no time. It's all happening simultaneously. It's all happening at once. When you're outside of this perception of reality, it's all happening instantaneously. And reality is a spectrum. So there's us experiencing time going along this way. There's a greater aspect that experiences time more like a spiral. There's the lower vibration. It's the past, coming to the present, going to the future. And it's our physical bodies that keep us anchored on this point. Now, if you don't have a body to anchor you, you're experiencing time differently. So here it is, those of us anchored in bodies, we're experiencing this. And our loved ones who have passed, those people who aren't in body anymore, out of time, out of history, are going like this, and they're like, they're not anchored in that spiral of time. And there are points where we cross, and there's points where we don't cross. So in our bodies, we can't perceive that far back in the past. This computer can't read floppy disks. And our bodies can't perceive what's going on in the future. We can't decode that higher vibratory software. As consciousness, we can conceive and perceive it all. When you're dealing with people who have passed, they're a little more consciousness than we are. They're not tethered to their bodies. So there's this experience. I've actually had this experience with people who have passed, where they come in and out of my reality at different times. And I'll perceive them as very young. I'll perceive them as in their 50s or their 80s, however old they were when they passed. I'll perceive them as newly passed or having passed a long time ago. When they passed a long time ago, they're a little more diffuse. And we, in our present moment, can communicate with ourselves in the past and ourselves in the future. And I used to just think this was kind of like a psychological exercise. It's a personal growth exercise. I can heal my past experiences by imagining my current self, age I am now, going back to that childhood trauma and standing in front of the parent yelling at me and telling them off or taking me out of the room. Big surprise to that parent because I'm 10 years older than they were at the time. And it was a healing to do that. And then there have been times when I have been in crisis and I don't know how to get through this. So I imagine myself 10 years in the future and I'll say, how did I get through this? So what has started happening now is I've started having visitations from myself from 10 years ago. I'll be standing in my kitchen doing dishes and I'll suddenly feel my younger self going, how did you get through this? And I can find myself saying, it's going to be okay. It's not going to be that long. It'll get better. And then I'll have this deja vu where it's like, oh gosh, I remember hearing that 10 years ago. Visitations from my past self to me as my current future self. It takes it out of that train track of perception when you start to realize that time isn't necessarily a linear measurement. It's a marking point in existence, and from the perspective of consciousness, it is a framework of this reality, but it is not a limitation as consciousness. And as we are all going through this experience of greater consciousness coming into physical form, and us experiencing it as our bodies and personalities. So we're experiencing greater consciousness, which feels like waking up. And really it's just our greater selves coming more into form and having more of a physical experience. We are sensing beyond those boundaries of time, those physical limitations. Time is one of those physical limitations, and we're sensing beyond it. One of the things you might have also noticed is that time as a measurement isn't so reliable anymore. I mean, we all know that if we're in a good book, or we're intently studying, or we're writing something lost in a movie, we don't pay attention to the passage of time. So suddenly I'm late for that appointment. But also there'll be times where you're looking up and it's like, oh my gosh, only 30 seconds has gone by. It's like we're measuring things now like in radio time and podcast time, where it's like, 15-second commercial feels like a really long time. Commercials in the past used to take minutes. So time is actually feeling more malleable. And we'll be in the midst of an experience, time will accelerate. So we've gotten to the point of being aware that time is malleable, that time accelerates and decelerates, can slow down, can speed up. And when you start to be aware of yourself as consciousness navigating through life, rather than I'm just a body personality with an increasing awareness navigating through life. When you start to navigate through life as consciousness, then you can start to play with things like stretching and shrinking time. Getting out of the traffic jam by just collapsing the wave between you and the place you're trying to get to. Play with this week. Notice time. Notice when time is not making any sense. Notice when time speeds up and shrinks. Because as you become aware of it, as you notice it, it increases your perception. It validates your awareness that this reality is shifting and changing, and those definitions are becoming less solid and real. Start to realize that life is actually a fun game to play and not some arduous trek through density and effort. Now, if you like these videos, you can subscribe to them on YouTube. You can also sign up below to get them in your inbox. If you want to know more, my website is joan-newcomb.com. I put out a weekly radio show and podcast talking about these things. I write a weekly blog and newsletter expounding on this stuff. I hold meetups in the Puget Sound, in Seattle, Bellevue, Tacoma, and University Place, talking about this stuff. Do a monthly webinar online for people who aren't local. And if you want to know more about how to navigate your life as greater consciousness, have a lot more fun and a lot less effort moving through your life, open yourself up to unexpected results beyond what you can imagine, go to joan-newcomb.com and look at my coaching programs. So go to joan-newcomb.com, and I'll see you in another couple days with another Mystic Minute. Not a brief history of time, not all about time. Son of a bitch. Layers of time, unpacking time, what time is all about. It's about time.